live. Today is January 1st, 2025. It is currently 8:57 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And today's live is a continuation of my previous live about using African traditional religions in the Western world to perpetuate and maintain oppression. And I'm going to talk about, first, let's talk about, in my previous video, I was talking about how, like, particularly, I'll say hoodoo because that is what I identify with and what I practice. Okay. And I was saying in my previous video about how in the Western world, hoodoo is used to just maintain oppression. It's to maintain the enslaved mentality because it's to maintain the indoctrination that is gained from religion. Because just like in religion, what gets people to stay in religion, particularly Black people in Christianity, is first of all materialism. I want money. I want the nice car. I want the house. I I I want to live comfortably. I want the clothes. I want the status. I want to be able to take trips. I want the hair, the nails, the jewelry. And so they become indoctrinated with religion for those things. That's how you kept in the loop in religion, in Christianity. I'll tithe. So, I can stay in good standing and in favor with God and get money. Okay. Also with religion, you have the emotional part, emotionalism. Oh, I want a husband. I'm tired of being by myself. Where's my God-given husband? Where's my God-given wife? Where's my godly wife? Where's my godly husband? Um, oh, I've been so hurt. Let me do my season of being single so God can heal me, so I can be ready for my godly husband, my kingdom marriage. That's all emotionalism. Emotionalism, my enemies, God will make my enemies my footstool. God will, every time that rises up against me, God is going to handle my haters. All that's emotionalism. And it's the same in the way that hoodoo is practiced in the Western world. Materialism. Okay, you do a money spell, money ritual for me to open my road so I can get this car, I can get this job, I can get this money, I can get more clients. I can get checks in the mail, I can get the car, I can take the vacation, I can get the house. Oh, can you do the spell for me for emotional reasons? Oh, so I can get my baby daddy back, or I can get my SP to come back, or I can get my husband, or this person did this to me, so let me get revenge. Let me do a return to sender. Let me do a curse. Let me do a hex. All that stems from religion. And you keep these people in a loop because you don't get to the root of why is this even happening in your life? Because so within, so without. What is the root of your situation? And you're keeping these clients on a hamster wheel. You're keeping a rouster because they keep coming back, and you don't teach them how to get out of their situation, because you don't want to teach them how to get out of their situation, because that means that you won't have clients. You won't have money for your business. So you'll give them just what they want. You'll give them the dopamine hit so that they can give you a 5-star review, and they can keep coming back for more and keep bringing you more clients. And the goal is not to set the captives free. The goal is not to teach them how to fish. The goal is just to feed them and keep them coming back to get another money spell, another love spell, another return to sender spell. Instead of asking, what is it about you that you need to clean up about yourself, so you never have to face the situation again. And if you do face the situation again, you'll know how to handle it without coming to me. So is the goal really to heal people, to set the captives free, or is it just to keep them enslaved? When we're talking about Black people who have now awakened to their African traditional religious practices, you know, are you really awakened to those practices, or are you still using those practices under the guise of religion, indoctrinated religion? Have you really done the work to cleanse yourself of indoctrination when it comes to religion before you start practicing these African traditional religions or practices? Hey, everybody, like, make it make sense. And that is the interaction, the engagement that I'm having with the Black spiritual community here in the African diaspora. Because really, what are you doing it for? Are you here just to perpetuate oppression and have the mentality of enslaved people, having the mentality of our enslaved ancestors? That's the mentality they had, because that's where they were at the moment. But we know a whole lot more than what they knew, and we should be doing a whole lot better. Like, I really do feel that Black people who ascribe to the ATRs here in the Western world feel like that they are letting their ancestors down. They feel as if they're selling their ancestors out if they don't continue with the traditions of their ancestors. But you have to remember, the traditions of your ancestors was rooted. They were coming from a place of enslavement. That's all they knew. They did not have access to the resources that we have. And I truly believe that our ancestors do not want us to continue those practices, because we know better. We should be doing better. And they're not going to be mad. They're not going to give us a whooping. They're not going to disown us because, we're not following their traditions. The whole point is for us to start new ones, to pivot. And it's okay. There's no one that's going to come. And see, that's that religion. We're coming into African traditional practices and religions with that indoctrination from religion, saying that, I'm going to be punished. There's this man in the sky sitting on the throne, and he's going to come down and punish me. And that's how we're approaching working with our ancestors. If we don't continue their traditions, even though we realize that it's just perpetuating enslavement and oppression, if we don't continue their traditions, subconsciously what we're doing is, and what we believe is, that they're going to punish us. They're going to stop working with us. We're going to get in trouble. We're going to be on punishment. Because I don't want to have black eyed peas and greens on New Year's Day. So and while I'm talking about that, let me go to my Facebook page, because I liked how this person worded it. And I shared it on my Facebook page, talking about black eyed peas and cornbread and greens. And I know all of the perspectives of it. But I'm over us keeping traditions that are connected to our enslaved ancestors. Cause to me, it's just keeping us in that trap, in that energy of enslavement. Yes, that's what they did. But can we assign it a different energy? Do we have to keep perpetuating that energy of enslavement? Like, are we free or are we not? Because every post that I'm seeing and looking in history and doing research, that these dishes, these culinary dishes, these menu choices, these recipes all stem from an enslaved mentality. When are we free or are we not free? Why are we continuing that mindset? And I'm not saying this to be disrespectful, but either we free or we not. So let me talk about, since we're talking about black eyed peas, cornbread, and greens. So here's the post, and I'm gonna give credit where credit is due. I shared a post from Magical Lady Duchess, okay? And she had a image and it said, black eyed peas don't work. Let me see, because when I shared it, the image was cut off. So let me go straight to her page and see if I can. Oh, okay. So it didn't have anything to do with me sharing it. It's just how the image is. So she has on here, black eyed peas don't work. Food is not now, for those of you that don't know, in the African American culture, to have black eyed peas, greens, and cornbread for the New Year's is a tradition. And supposedly you eat these things that it will not necessarily guarantee, but it will help keep money in the household for the year. It will help keep abundance and prosperity in the household for the year, and protection if you have black eyed peas, cornbread, and greens for the new year. Now, interesting enough, I was talking to an elder today who was 81 years old. And you know what he said to me? He said to me, eating black eyed peas don't mean you're going to have money. You could still be broke. He said it. He was like, you could still be broke. This is an 81-year-old African American male telling me that you can eat black eyed peas and still be broke. He said, if you're going to be broke, you're going to be broke. He said, eating black eyed peas don't mean anything. And he said, I don't ever remember my grandmother saying anything about eating black eyed peas and having money. This is an 81-year-old African American male telling me this. Telling me that he does not recall. He said, my grandmother never talked about having black eyed peas and saying it was associated with money for the New Year's. And I'm like, but that's where we get it from. We supposedly got this tradition from you and your grandparents. And he was like, my grandmother never talked about that. He said, I don't know where that came from because my grandmother never talked about that. He was like, if you're going to be broke, you're going to be broke. He said, having black eyed peas does not guarantee that. Okay. So the picture, she says, this is from Magical Lady Duchess on her Facebook page that I shared it on my page. The picture says, black eyed peas don't work. Food is not a financial system. Ritual without action changes nothing. Luck doesn't beat structure. survival, not riches. Bottom line, symbolism is not strategy. So this is what she put. Let me read it for the post. She said, number one, food is not a financial system. Eating black eyed peas is a symbol, not a bank account, not ownership, not capital. You can't chew your way into wealth. Number two, ritual without action does nothing. Tradition only works when it's paired with behavior change. If nothing changes after the plate is cleared, nothing changes financially. Number three, luck doesn't beat structure. Bills, rent, interest rates, credit systems, and wages do not respond to folklore. They respond to contracts, access, and leverage. And I remember doing a video saying this. I remember doing a video saying these things. It wasn't related to black eyed peas, but I was just saying, like, you can do all the candle magic, the spells, the rituals, all of that, but if you not actually, if it doesn't change you, if it doesn't get you to pivot and change your mindset, what good is any of that? Okay, so luck, number three, luck doesn't beat structure. Bills, rent, interest rates, credit systems, and wages do not respond to folklore. They respond to contracts, access, and leverage. Number four, the tradition was about survival, not riches. Number four, the tradition was about survival, not riches. Excuse me. The tradition was about survival, not riches. I am so tired of these African traditional religions in the Western world, and it's just surviving. I don't want to survive no more, people. I don't want to survive no more. If I cannot access these African traditional religions and it takes me beyond survival, I don't want it. I am tired of having a scratching and surviving mentality like good times. If the African traditional religion that I subscribe to, the practices that I subscribe to, if it's going to keep me in survival mode, I don't want it. You can have it back. And I don't care who or what ancestors' toes I step on when I say it. They can never come to my altar again. They don't ever have to work with me again. I could care less. Because if all you're doing is to keep me in survival mode, I don't need you as an ancestor. I don't need you working for me, and you can get to stepping. How about that? Come on, people. Come on. And I know that I'm stepping on toes, and I take a breath. Because I'm tired of survival. Like I said, I'm tired of scratching and surviving like good times. So you can have it. You can have it. If me adhering to an ATR, an African traditional religion, is going to keep me in survival mode, I don't want it anymore. I will throw every book away on Hoodoo if it's going to keep me in survival mode. I don't want it. And I don't even think my ancestors want that for me. They are clapping. They are celebrating that I am evolving and growing and getting out of survival mode. But let me keep going. Let me repeat it one more time. Number four, the tradition was about survival, not riches. Black-eyed peas come from scarcity history, not abundance economics. They kept people alive, not wealthy. Black-eyed peas came from scarcity history, not abundance economics. They kept people alive, not wealthy. Number five, belief without education keeps people stuck. People were taught the ritual, but not the financial literacy, ownership strategy, or protection that originally went with community survival practices. And of course, they weren't taught it because they didn't know it. They didn't have the resources available to them at that time, but we do. So it is now our responsibility to stop perpetuating this tradition and not pair it with financial literacy and education. Because all we're doing is doing ourselves and our future generations a disservice by passing on this scarcity tradition. And we know way more than what our ancestors knew. Bottom line, eating black-eyed peas won't make you broke, but thinking symbolism replaces strategy will. Eating black-eyed peas won't make you broke, but thinking symbolism replaces strategy will. I hope y'all change and get the message. I'm giving out. Don't just do, also act. I hope y'all change and get the message I'm giving out. Don't just do, also act. All right. So let me get out of here. Well, let me go to there. Let me get out of here. It was something else I saw, but I don't know if I shared it on my Facebook page because someone else was saying the same thing. I screenshotted it, but I can't remember if I put it on my Facebook page or not. But anyway, let me go to about New Year's Eve, okay? From an African American perspective historically. Now, yesterday, I am a member of Hillside International Truth Center. I'm a member of the Truth Center in Atlanta, Georgia, okay? Now, they do New Year's Eve services, but they don't do it like in the traditional church where you're in church and you count down at midnight and then you bring in the service or you bring in the new year during the service. The way Hillside International Truth Center does it is that they have their service, like I think it starts at 7 and it'll be for 2 hours and you're not bringing in the New Year's at the Truth Center. But it's over with at 9. By that time, you can get home and do whatever, and you bring in New Year's Eve the way you see fit. They have a burning bowl ceremony. They have a ring shout. They have a letter where you write a letter to God, and then you put your address on it, and then you get the letter back in November to see if what you asked for, whether you got it, how you got it, all of that. That's how they honor and celebrate New Year's Eve at Hillside Truth Center. So yesterday, the message, I did not know this. I didn't know that it was called Freedom's Eve. And that I think yesterday marked 100 years or maybe 100, I don't know if it was 100 years or over 100 years anniversary of when enslaved Africans held a Freedom's Eve or a watch or a service on New Year's Eve because they were on the threshold of freedom. On January 1st, it was January 1st, 1864. No, 1862, excuse me, 1862. And they were holding a service because okay, let me get the date straight. So in 1862, December 31st, 1862, it was called a Freedom Eve service. And yesterday marked an anniversary of it. It was either 100 years, it was over 100 years where it was the anniversary of. And so on December 31st, 1862, the slaves, or those that were enslaved rather, They were on the threshold of freedom. Because on January 1st, 1863 is when the Emancipation Proclamation was signed. Okay? Okay, it was 150 years. That Oh, well, yeah, it was over 150 years yesterday that this service, it marked the anniversary of, okay? So when the Emancipation Proclamation was signed in Confederate States on New Year's Day of 1863, that on December 31st, the slaves held a service, and it was called Freedom Eve's service, where they were on the threshold of freedom, which means that within 24 hours, they would be free. If you were in Confederate States, you would be free. So they spent the previous evening like praising, shouting, praying, celebrating, because they knew that they were going to wake up in a different reality the next day. So they were preparing themselves and their family for that new reality. So I learned this yesterday when I attended the session at Hillside, the New Year's Eve session. I learned, that it was like celebrating over 150 years of this particular New Year's Eve service, or Freedom's Eve service that it was called. So my question is, and that is where we get the watch night service that most churches engage in on New Year's Eve. But if we're already free, why do you keep having a watch night service? And that is the origin of watch night services, and we're quote unquote free. Why do you keep having it? Why? Unless subconsciously you believe that you're not free, or subconsciously you're still perpetuating the spell, the oppression of slavery. Once that event occurred on January 1st, 1863, it's African American people should no longer be holding watch night services, unless, of course, it is to celebrate the fact that we're no longer enslaved. And that's not what most watch night services talk about during watch night services, because I've been to enough of them to know. They don't even mention the historical basis of watch night service. They don't even tell you about that in a church. I didn't know anything about that until I attended New Year's Eve service yesterday. All my years attending the watch night service, I knew nothing about the historical connection between enslaved Africans and watch night service here in the Western world with blacks in the church. I didn't know. I didn't even know that was the basis for it. So unless we're using that day to celebrate the fact that our ancestors came together because it was a moment where they had to mentally prepare for the fact that they were no longer going to be enslaved, and what that looked like for them. Unless we're going to approach it from that point of view, why are we even observing watch night services? For what? For what? It's just not making sense. So let me read this article that came across my timeline on Facebook. This comes from Time Magazine. It's a 5-minute read. It's entitled "The Slaves Dread New Year's Day the Worst, The Grim History of January 1st." And it's by Olivia B. Waxman. And it was updated December 27th, 2019 at 8:57 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. It was originally published December 27th, 2019 at 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. All right. Americans are likely to think of New Year's Eve and New Year's Day as a time to celebrate the fresh start that a new year represents, but there is also a troubling side to the holiday's history. In the years before the Civil War, the first day of New Year was often a heartbreaking one for enslaved people in the United States. In the African American community, New Year's Day used to be widely known as Hiring Day or Heartbreak Day, as the African American abolitionist journalist William Cooper Nell described it, because enslaved people spent New Year's Eve waiting, wondering if their owners were going to rent them out to someone else, thus potentially splitting up their families. The renting out of slave labor was a relatively common practice in the antebellum South and a profitable practice for white slave owners and hirers. Hiring Day was part of the larger economic cycle in which most debts were collected and settled on New Year's Day, says Alexis McCrossan, an expert on the history of New Year's Eve and New Year's Day and a professor of history at Southern Methodist University, who writes about Hiring Day in her forthcoming book, Time's Touchstone, The New Year in American Life. Some enslaved people were put up for auction that day or held under contracts that started in January. These transactions also took place all year long, and contracts could last for different amounts of time. These deals were conducted privately among families, friends, and business contacts, and slaves were handed over in town squares, on courthouse steps, and sometimes simply on the side of the road, according to Divided Mastery, Slave Hiring in the American South by Jonathan D. Martin. Accounts of the cruelty of Hiring Day came from records left by those who secured their freedom, who described spending the day before January 1st, hoping and praying that their hirers would be humane and that their families could stay together. Of all days in the year, the slaves dread New Year's Day the worst of any, a slave named Lewis Clark said in an 1842 account. On New Year's Day, we went to the auctioneer's block to be hired to the highest bidder for 1 year, Israel Campbell wrote in a memoir published in 1861 in Philadelphia, in which he describes being hired out 3 times. That's where that saying comes from, that what you do on New Year's Day, you'll be doing all the rest of the year. A former slave known as Sister Harrison said in an interview in 1937. Haven't we heard that? That what you do on New Year's Day, you'll be doing on the rest of the year? That's where it comes from? Is when you went to when you were an enslaved person and you went to the auctioneer's block to be auctioned off? That's deep. That's where that saying came from. Harriet Jacobs wrote a particularly detailed account in the Slave's New Year's Day chapter of her 1861 autobiography, Incidents in the Life of a Slave Girl. Hiring Day at the South takes place on the 1st of January. On the 2nd, the slaves are expected to go to their new masters, she wrote. She observed slave owners and farmers renting out their human chattel for extra income during the period between the cotton and corn harvest and the next planting season. From Christmas to New Year's Eve, many families would wait anxiously to find out whether they would be rented out and to whom. On New Year's Day, at the appointed hour, the grounds are thronged with men, women, and children waiting like criminals to hear their doom pronounced Jacob's rope. And we over here celebrating Christmas and New Year's Eve and not even knowing the history of that in the eyes and in the perspective of our enslaved ancestors. But yet, so now that gives a fresh perspective of their traditions, eating certain foods during New Year's Eve and New Year's Day. They were eating those foods. They was just celebrating at the fact that they weren't land contracted out, that they weren't rented out, that their family stayed together. To them, that was reason to celebrate. It had nothing to do with Christmas, and it had nothing to do with the new year. It had everything to do with the fact that my family is still intact, and our family wasn't put on the auction block this year. We got another year where we can be together. We can still be together as a family. Yeah. This is so interesting. We got to elevate beyond. We got to elevate beyond. Like when we're keeping these traditions, all we're doing is we're recycling the trauma. Let's sit with it. Let's acknowledge it, but we can start new traditions. Now I see why, at first it was because, religion. I didn't celebrate holidays and birthdays. And then I got out of religion and started celebrating holidays and birthdays. And now I'm just like, no. And now I understand why it's no. It has nothing to do with religion. It's just about history and culture. Christmas time and New Year's Eve time wasn't a happy time for enslaved Africans. Now I see why I'm just like, no, y'all can keep y'all Christmas. Y'all can keep y'all New Year's. Because in reality, if your ancestry connects you to slavery and you find out that you had enslaved ancestors, Christmas and New Year's is not a happy time for you. It wasn't a happy time for them. Now, maybe you celebrating it is actually a step up because it wasn't a happy time for them. And so now you get to present to them a time where it's not trauma. So let me backtrack and let me cancel that out. So you're celebrating it. That is evolving. Because if you can trace your lineage and it traces back to the fact that you had enslaved Africans in your lineage, and they looked at Christmas and New Year's Eve as not a happy time. It wasn't about, because they just didn't know once the new year hit whether they were still going to be together as a family or they were going to be rented out and separated from the family. So you celebrating Christmas is elevating them. Because now through you, they can now experience the joy of waking up on New Year's Day knowing that the family won't be separated. So in that sense, okay, you're elevating your ancestors. You're showing them that you don't have to relive that trauma no more. That trauma doesn't exist anymore. That Christmas and New Year's is a time of celebration and family and joy in this family now. It's not like how it was when you all were living. So I'll give you that. And that's if you knew that about your family, if you knew that about your history. But most Black people don't know what I just read. So you're not even celebrating Christmas or New Year's Eve from that perspective. Because most people would not even know, had no clue about what I just read. But now that you know, you can now look at it as like, okay, I'm elevating my ancestors because they were in fear of their life during Christmas and New Year's Eve, and now we don't have to concern ourselves with that. But how many black people actually know that? So, in that sense, you will be elevating your ancestors in that sense. Now, let me continue to read. On one of these fateful days, Jacobs saw a mother lead 7 children to the auction block. She knew that some of them would be taken from her, but they took all. The slave trader who took the children wouldn't tell her where he was taking them because it depended on where he could get the highest price. Jacob said she would never forget the mother crying out, "Gone, all gone. Why don't God kill me?" Enslaved people who attempted to resist going to their new masters were whipped and thrown in jail until they relented and promised not to run away during the new arrangement. Older slaves were also particularly vulnerable, as Jacobs describes one owner trying to hire out a frail, roughly 70-year-old woman because he was moving away. But the history of New Year's Day and American slavery is not all horror. The holiday was also associated with freedom. The federal ban on the transatlantic slave trade went into effect on New Year's Day in 1808. And African American communities did celebrate, but the festivities were short lived. Different slave trade abolition commemorations took place between 1808 and 1831, but they died out because the domestic slave trade was so vigorous, says McCrossin. The risk of violence was also too great. For example, on New Year's Eve in 1827 in New York City, a white mob attacked African American congregants and vandalized their church. The holiday became more associated with freedom than slavery when Abraham Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation, freeing slaves in Confederate states on New Year's Day in 1863. Slaves went to church to pray and sing on December 31st, 1862, and that's why there are still New Year's Eve prayer services at African American churches nationwide. As such watch night services, congregants continue to pray for more widespread racial equality more than 150 years later. But why do you need to continue to pray for more widespread racial equality more than 150 years later? If you supposedly got your freedom, why do I need racial equality? Get your freedom, get to stepping, and stop asking them for equality. And they don't pray for equality. I've been to plenty of watch night services. Most of the time, people are praying for themselves and their household. They may pray for leaders, maybe, but most of the time at watch night services, they are not praying for racial equality. They're not. Most people are praying for their needs to be met and for their problems. And then correction, December 27th, the original version of the story misstated the year of an attack on an African American church on New Year's Eve in New York City. It was 1827, not 1927. So that is just a perspective for black people listening. Like, we got to know why we are engaging in these traditions. Why? And after a while, it's just like it's important. I'm not saying that we should not know our history, but our history is not limited to slavery. And We have to stop using these African traditional religious practices or religions to keep perpetuating the mindset of enslaved people. That's who they were at that time. They were enslaved and they were coming out of enslavement. So, of course, they're going to do things based on what they have been experiencing for the past 15, 20, 30 years, 40, 50 years. That's not your story anymore. And it's okay. You are being given permission today. It's okay to change and pivot. Just because you change and pivot, just because you decide you're not going to continue that tradition anymore, it does not mean that you're dishonoring your ancestors. It doesn't mean that you forgot. It doesn't mean that you're a sellout. It's just letting your ancestors know, I acknowledge that part of our family history, but that's not where the story ends. Just because I remember it, just because I recall it, doesn't mean that I have to continue to make it my reality. Remembering and recalling does not translate to, it does not have to translate that you have to continue to live it. Remembering and recalling is a past action. It should stay in the past. And you can even decide how you want to remember and recall it. Do you know you can go back and change your past? You can quantum jump in the past and rechange that story. Neville Goddard talks about that. A technique where it's called remember when. I remember when. And you can literally change the events or how the events were perceived. You don't have to keep perpetuating that same enslaved narrative of survival, 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 survival. Oh, I'm just so happy. I'm so happy. I'm so happy this year that my family didn't get sold on the auction block. Oh, we got one more year to be together. Let's take a breath. Let's celebrate. Let's breathe a sigh of relief. You don't have to continue to just be happy with trauma, to be happy with dysfunction. You don't have to settle into that and celebrate that. That was our ancestors' story. We honor it, we acknowledge it, we read about it, but we don't have to stay in it. We don't have to. And just because our grandma and our great grandma and our great great granddaddy and our great great uncle had traditions, don't mean that we have to keep doing them. Instead of making black eyed peas, cornbread, and greens, how about you go find the choicest steak, the most expensive steak out there, and why don't you eat that for New Year's Eve and see how your consciousness change? Show your ancestors different. Because how is it that we can say, oh, I'm my ancestors' wildest dreams. I'm the dream of my ancestor, but you still feeding them the food that they knew. You ain't showing them nothing different. You're not giving them a different kind of experience. Give them some filet mignon, or serve them a $200-$300 steak. Go to the most expensive restaurant that your consciousness can comprehend and sustain at the time, and give them that experience instead. And watch how your finances just flourish. Instead of giving them black eyed peas and cornbread and greens. And if let's say, I don't know, let's say, your consciousness for you is a chuck roast or a prime rib. That's a lot for you. That's really stretching your consciousness for you. Then do that. Take baby steps. Whatever is considered a stretch outside of your comfort zone, do that for New Year's Day or New Year's Eve. Eat that for a meal. Show your ancestors something different. Because enough with the survival. Because all it is, you're making these foods and these dishes, and it's just putting you back into a state of depression and oppression and, oh, woe is me, and victim mentality. I know this is uncomfortable and it's controversial, but enough is enough. I don't believe that we as Black people have been in the West, have been in the Western world, have been exposed to our African traditional religious practices to maintain survival, to be in survival mode. I think we were introduced to them so that we could study them. We could honor where our ancestors were at the time when they developed these practices, but it doesn't mean that we have to stay there. We don't have to stay in survival mode. Cause I don't know about y'all, but this year I'm like, I want to hear butterflies and jazz. When I wake up, I want to hear butterflies and jazz. I don't want to hear gunshots. I don't want to hear police sirens. I don't want to hear ambulances. I don't want to hear people cussing and fussing at 8 o'clock in the morning, screaming and hollering. You know, I don't want to hear people screaming and hollering at 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning. I want to hear butterflies and jazz. My ancestors deserve to experience through me butterflies and jazz. Not gunshots and fire engines and police sirens and ambulances and people yelling, fussing, and cussing. Butterflies and jazz. And they deserve to eat some filet mignon and go to a 5-star restaurant where just for me, myself, and I, the bill is $300. And that's not including gratuity. That's what my ancestors deserve. They've had enough of the black eyed peas, cornbread, and greens and cornbread dressing. Although I love those things, they are good. But they want to experience more through me. They want me to use my gifts of working with herbs and candles and incense more than just perpetuating oppression and survival. They want me to stop limiting myself to doing a money spell just so I can maintain the bills for the month. No, they want me to do a money spell so I can be a millionaire, a billionaire. So they can have that experience. They want me to do workings and alchemy and transform so I can stop living in survival. I'm just here to tell y'all, I don't know about y'all, but my nervous system does not deserve to be exposed to this foolishness. Butterflies and jazz, y'all. Butterflies and jazz. I am worthy of it. I deserve it. And I manifest now. Butterflies and jazz. Because I am divine, great mother goddess, temporarily in human form. And everything that divine, great mother goddess is, I am. And if divine, great mother goddess is butterflies and jazz, then so am I. And I have what divine, great mother goddess has: butterflies and jazz. And so it is. I'm not. I am committed this day to elevate. I will use what my ancestors left behind as far as hoodoo and other African traditional religious practices. I will use it for more than just survival. I will use it for more than just sustaining survival. Because currently that is what it's being used for, is to sustain survival. I give myself permission that I don't have to choose that. And that I'm not going to get in trouble if I choose differently. My ancestors are not going to be disappointed in me because I choose differently. Thank you for everyone who will share this, who liked the live, who's going to come back later and listen to the replay. Thank you for those that commented. Thank you for the new subscribers. Like I'm telling you, freedom, freedom. 2026 is freedom for me. I am going to hear butterflies and jazz. And it's better for me to ask forgiveness than to ask for permission. I don't have time to be asking for permission. Butterflies and jazz. My soul deserves butterflies and jazz. My nervous system deserves butterflies and jazz. I am doing my ancestors a disservice by using the alchemy, the magic, the traditions that they passed down to me. I am doing them a disservice when I just use those traditions to sustain survival. Until next time. Until next time. Stay sovereign. Stay sovereign. Stay sovereign.